Now, it's obviously no secret that 2025 has not been a good year for crypto so far. But what I want to talk about today is how do you best protect your portfolio, right? I mean, are we going to see an alt season? Are we not? Is everything over? Is it just the beginning? Who knows, right? I mean, what we're seeing right now is it's kind of this key inflection point in which there's a lot of different things going on in which we don't really know the outcome. Now, of course, the answer here could be just sell all your crypto and you're out and all that. Or it could be keep all your crypto and then you're going to be exposed to maximum gains, all that type of thing, right? But we just don't know for sure, right? That is the thing, in my opinion, that makes it really, really difficult. And so I want to talk to you and kind of walk you through some of these things that you can do to best protect your portfolio and make sure that it doesn't bleed out or, you're missing out on gains regardless of which direction that we go. So first off, that's what I want to start out with. What we can see here, obviously, there's a ton of speculation as to where we are. You can see here, there's the argument being made that we are here in terms of like the psychology of a market. There's essentially that's kind of what we're thinking here, is that this is where we're at, not here on the like opposite end of all of the best gains, right? We don't know for sure. I mean, that's exactly it. If you look, you can see both fit somewhat similarly, right? We don't know for sure exactly where we're at. And it's very, very important that we don't essentially guess or make too many speculations as to where we are, because things can change very, very wildly depending on where we are, of course. And so what we can also see is if we look at the total versus the total 2 market caps, we can see at this point in time, so the red line is going to be the total market cap, which is stable coins, Bitcoin, all that type of stuff. And then we have the total 2, which is everything excluding Bitcoin. So effectively, the only difference here is going to be whether Bitcoin is included in the market cap or not. And so what we can see here is if we look back at this chart, this actually starts about mid-October of 2023. You can see the difference is pretty interesting. And all of this, keep in mind, is basically on the back of Bitcoin. So this has and still remains to be a Bitcoin cycle, at least thus far. We can see that here, gains being up about 142% versus about 88%. Now, again, remember, these are still really, really great gains either way. But of course, the Bitcoin has been the one that has held up most kind of any coin thus far. And what we can see is exactly that when we look at the Bitcoin dominance chart. So you can see here, this again, if we start this back at about early, or I guess like the end of 2023, about the same time period, this is about what it would look like. It has basically been Bitcoin up only. We did see this kind of little alt season, which is kind of that November to December timeframe after the US election. But if you do look, I mean, we have basically kept to both of these trend lines, actually. This obviously we've seen, aside from this kind of mini alt season area, we did see this kind of dip below this trend line. But if you do look, it has come back up in line with this trend line, and is also holding up with this trend line as well on that little bit of a steeper slope. So again, it's very, very hard to say exactly where Bitcoin dominance is going to top out. But generally, as we've seen before, in order for there to be an alt season, Bitcoin dominance does need to go down. Something similar to what we saw here. But again, usually a little bit more volatile than this and a little bit more extended out than this. Again, this could have been it, but if so, I would say this is an underwhelming alt season by kind of all accounts. So anyway, what does this mean? How do you protect your portfolio? Well, effectively, if you're looking at this, it is not a good time to be in altcoins. Altcoins are going to be very, very tricky and difficult to hold because we don't know exactly, going back to here, we don't really know where we are, right? I mean, you can make the argument one way or the other, but realistically, we don't actually know where we're at in this kind of whole scheme of things. So with that being said, all we can do is look at where we're at right now and what things are looking like today. And that is Bitcoin dominance continues to make new highs. Obviously, we did have that wick over a couple weeks or about a month or two ago where we saw some massive liquidations happening. But so we haven't actually gotten back to that level, but you can see that kind of like excluding wicks, we are continuing to make new highs consistently for about the past 2.5 years. So, or I guess a year and a half is what I should say. But that is what is important to note, is because we are this is Bitcoin season still, right? And so I would only be holding altcoins that are very, very, very high conviction. What are those, you may ask? Well, we're going to dive into that here in a little bit, and we're going to talk about which altcoins, even though like you may be high conviction in some altcoins, which you may not even want to be holding anyway. So we're going to be talking a lot about that, because in my opinion, this is the key to protecting your crypto portfolio, to making sure that you are essentially exposed to upside, but less exposed to downside. And there's a couple really key things that you can look at to make sure that you're able to do both, again, as best as possible. If crypto goes down, there's not going to be any place where you're safe. You're going to lose kind of throughout, but you can at least make sure you're losing less than what you would potentially otherwise. So with that said, if you are interested in kind of trading, buying, selling, doing whatever, maybe playing some of this market volatility that we have seen play out, I do have a link in the description below to Phemex. Phemex is doing an Easter trading competition right now. Really, really great place to start if you are looking to kind of maybe test the waters in crypto, all that type of stuff, leverage trading specifically. You can see here they have 100% loss coverage here, with 50 USDT being covered. So if you are looking to just kind of try it out, see how things go, there's literally zero risk if you're trading with 50 USDT and under. So something to think about if you are interested. And then there also is a share of 45,000 USDT as a prize pool, if that's something that you're interested in as well. Again, here are the kind of the like classifications, or like the areas that you need to be trading into if you are looking to kind of qualify. The minimum being $500 in volume. Very, very small, very, very achievable. If you are not super familiar with how to trade leverage, this would essentially be like this $50 on 10x leverage. So very, very achievable if that is something that you're looking to do. So anyway, moving on, I want to kind of talk about what we're seeing. This is on ETH specifically, but this is indicative of what we could potentially be seeing through the wider alt market. Here you can see this is Ethereum quarterly returns as a percentage. In 2018, they saw 46% drop and then a 15% bounce. And you can see here we had a 45% in Q1 of 2025. And so far we're down 0.88%. But again, this obviously changes very rapidly. I think what the poster is looking to insinuate here is that we may have a little bit of a rebound in Q2, which would be great, right? I mean, I would not complain at all if we saw something like that. However, look at what followed. 2 subsequent quarters of really, really brutal, punishing times. And then, of course, things kind of come back a little bit later on. But we need to always keep this in mind, because, again, we don't know for sure. This can always be sometimes a little bit of like a sucker's trap. And so we need to make sure that we are best positioned in making sure that we're holding the right types of coins. What are the right types of coins? I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, that we'd be getting to this. Well, now is the moment of truth. So starting out, I'm going to pick on SUI as a prime example, and I'm going to kind of talk through why I'm looking at or what some of the most important things I'm looking at for a crypto coin are. Obviously, we're here looking at market cap. SUI had a really, really fantastic run up in 2024, coming back down pretty aggressively here in 2025. If we do look at price, we're sitting kind of at like this $2 level of support. We have seen this before. If we do break below that, we're probably going to be going back into like the 80 to 90 cent range, just because that's kind of what we saw prior to the run up, and kind of stalling out at that $2 before we continued the run up again. However, this is not kind of the purpose of why we're looking at SUI. SUI is one that I think actually is a pretty inspiring and pretty impressive crypto project. However, if we are looking to go into a 2-3 year long bear market, whatever we want to call this is not going to be a great token to hold. And here is why. If you look at the circulating supply, there's about 3.2 billion of the 10 billion that are max supply, essentially. So what we're going to be seeing over the next 2 to 3 years is more and more SUI tokens minted onto the market. Now, of course, if we are in a bear market, this is going to continue to suppress the price, and we could see price get back down even into this 40 to 50 to 60 cent range. Totally possible, because of all of the built-in sell pressure from these locked up tokens. Now let's go and let's take a look at another example. Ondo is another good one. Ondo, same type of thing. Ondo is a very, very well-hyped project. I think there's a lot of people who have high aspirations for Ondo. I personally have high aspirations for Ondo, but again, same type of thing. 3.16 billion out of 10 billion total circulating supply. So regardless of what your kind of motivations or what your kind of sentiment behind Ondo or SUI or things like that could be, there is still so much selling pressure built into this token. So for me personally, even though I believe in things like SUI, like Ondo, I'm not going to be getting into them right now, because given that we don't exactly know where we're at kind of on this market cycle, we could be here. I would like to believe that we're here, but we don't know that, right? We could be here, and all of this has to happen before we get back into this type of thing happening again. Remember, it's a cycle, right? So this could be the end, but again, the end of this is going to run back in to this, again, really, really strong rally. So really, really hard to say exactly where we're going to be for sure. Given that we don't know, this is something that we want to be very, very careful of, is these types of tokens that have this innate selling pressure on it. That's going to be very, very damaging if we have to hold this over the course of 2 or 3 years. Now let's go take a look at something like Ethereum. Now Ethereum, of course, has not done particularly well at all. It is sub $2,000. Very, very bad. If we look, we can see multiple times where it hit kind of that $4,000 range and then came right back down. So far, we did actually see it hit kind of the $2,500 in 2024. We have since fallen way, way below that. So if we go look at the max, we're kind of coming back down to prices that we saw back in 2022 and 2023 in kind of the midst of the bear market after FTX and all that type of stuff. However, what we can see here with Ethereum is, while they technically have an infinite max supply, there's no more token unlocks coming, right? So we can see it's fully diluted, at least for what's circulating. Now, if you're not familiar with Ethereum, it has kind of this mint burn type of dynamic. So it can inflate, it can deflate, it can kind of do both or neither. That's one thing that we need to be very, very careful of. But again, if you're familiar with Ethereum, the inflation on it is not very much at all. Now, again, let's go take a look at kind of the OG, the original Bitcoin. We can see here sitting at about 82. Again, we can see here, not fully diluted, because we do have that max supply of 21 million, but this max supply of 21 million is on a fixed vesting schedule. It's through the block rewards, and this will not be finished emitting until the year 2140. So again, we are going to have some dilution here, but again, it's Bitcoin, right? This is to prove that some dilution is not terrible, but it's we don't have 70% of the total supply to come back into Bitcoin. Most of what exists for Bitcoin is already here, and so there's not really too much, there's maybe 5% left. So this is what we need to be very, very careful of. And so this is why what I personally am doing, am looking to go towards coins that are mostly, if not fully, diluted at this point. Let's look at Solana. Solana is the last one we'll take a look at, but you can see something similar here. So with Solana, they actually do have their max supply of infinite, because I believe they have moved over to kind of that mint burn type of dynamic as well. But what you can see here is circulating versus total supply, almost fully diluted. You can see only about $9 billion of essentially locked up value at this point in time. So the thing that's really important to note here, and the thing that I am focusing on most importantly, is if I want exposure to altcoins for a potential alt season that may be on the horizon, may not be, we don't know for sure, I'm going to be looking at coins that are strong, have strong communities, and are mostly diluted, because the coins that have tons of lockups, what I will call the VC coins, a lot of the VCs got in it very, very, very low market caps, very minimal prices. And so even though SUI is down, let's say 60% from its all-time high, they still may be up 4 or 5x from where they got in, right? And so as soon as their unlocks come, they're going to be dumping on the market. And of course, that is going to push sell pressure further downward. So you have to be aware of that. You have to be super, super careful when you're looking into that type of thing to make sure that you don't get caught. Because if you get caught on the way down, again, you can be a bag holder for multiple years. And then again, if you think about it, so let's go back and we'll take a look at SUI again, just as an example. Again, I know I'm kind of hammering on SUI, but this problem is not limited to SUI specifically. As we saw, it's, there's Ondo, there's Sonic, there's Aptos, there's Say. I mean, all of these have very, very similar issues. But what we can see here is the fully diluted valuation is almost $21 billion, while the market cap right now is only 6.8. So again, the fully diluted valuation, if you look at kind of the full history, The all-time high of SUI was actually only about $16 billion, and that was again at $5. Right now we are at $2, and we are still at a higher fully diluted valuation than what we saw back at its all-time highs back in January. So again, this is why it's very, very important to understand lockups, understand how that could potentially work. Because if you're holding for 2, 3, 4 years, I can almost guarantee you are probably not going to see those highs that we saw even just a couple months ago. So the reason why I bring this up is because you need to be aware of this so you're not essentially a permanent bag holder. The reason why I know this, I've done it before. So I'm not just like speaking from, my ivory tower. I have actually done this, and I have been a bag holder, and so I know this very, very well myself. So I just want to kind of share with you some of my kind of my own experience, some of the things that I've learned in the past to hopefully help you, not make the same mistakes as me. Now, again, the most important thing is if you are wanting exposure to altcoins in this alt season, potentially as it could come up, again, there's no guarantees. It could not come by. And at that point, this is when we're going to be looking to hold for multiple years. So you have to be looking at altcoins that you feel comfortable holding for 1, 2, 3, 4 years time, because it might take that long for it to come back. Token emissions, the dilution of the coin, a lot of that type of stuff is highly important. It is critical. So the way that I'm looking at my own investing strategy and how I'm kind of tweaking my portfolio right now is making sure that I hold Bitcoin, because again, Bitcoin is the OG. It's the one that kind of moves the market. So if we see a Bitcoin run, it's going to start with Bitcoin. I think we all know this. After that, I'm going to be looking for really, really strong, high quality altcoins that could and should move the market if we were to come into an alt season. To me, this means XRP, this means not Bitcoin, this means Ethereum, this means Solana, things like that. And then if we want to go look into kind of smaller altcoins, we can look at things that have either been mostly diluted at this point, or coins that we think or don't have kind of those same kind of dilutionary type of economics to them. The big one that I'm holding right now is ICP. ICP has basically been fully diluted at this point. They still do have an inflationary mechanism, very similar to Ethereum, where they essentially are minting new supply into existence based on the staking rewards, but they also have kind of the burn rewards for people essentially to host their applications on the ICP network. So it is dynamic, very similar to what we see out of Ethereum. So those are kind of the big ones that I'm looking at. Things like Ondo, things like SUI, things that I'm very, very bullish in and believe in the long term, not buying, because the price mechanics just don't really work right now. Doesn't matter, you can't marry your bags, right? And so it doesn't matter that you might feel long-term bullish about them. If the price mechanics just don't work out in the time frame that you're looking for them to work out, it's just not a buy, right? It's as simple as that. So anyway, hopefully you found the information in this video useful. If you did, a like and a subscribe really, really does help. Hopefully this kind of helps kind of contextualize how I'm looking at kind of viewing and adjusting my bags to make sure that I'm both exposed to an altcoin season if we see one materialize, but I'm also protected if we don't and we head into a multi-year long bear market. Either is completely possible, so you have to be prepared for both outcomes. So anyway, like I said, hopefully this was useful. If so, like and subscribe really, really do help. If you have any comments, questions, thoughts, anything like that you want to interact with me with directly, just drop them in the comment section below. I do read and respond to all of those. So if you have anything that you want me to see, that'd be a great way to do so. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one.